should my kid go to college or should they just go into a career? And what we're saying at the College of St. Joseph the Worker is you don't have to choose one. You can select both simultaneously. And so that's what we do. And as we train up students in the intellectual tradition in the liberal arts to earn their bachelor's degrees, we also raise them up in the skilled trades to earn their certifications and journeyman status in whatever field that they choose.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Office Hours. I'm Will Geiger, and on Office Hours, I'm breaking down the latest trends in higher education and what those trends mean for students and families. I'm really excited about today's guest, who's the president of the College of St. Joseph the Worker, Dr. Jacob Imam. Welcome, Jacob.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so to start things off, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your founder's story and how your
Yeah.
background shaped the idea that has become the College of St. Joseph the Worker.
Well, I was always kind of a nerdy kid of sorts, so I'm stationed as being one that would inevitably find his way into higher education, but not necessarily in the skilled trades. And that's exactly what the College of St. Joseph the Worker offers: is both a rigorous honors college level education to earn your bachelor's degree, as well as certificates in the skilled trades. That's carpentry, HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. So there's a little bit of a dichotomy there that we marry together. I was at a lunch with a good friend of mine. He was working in admissions at a college in the South, and at some point during that conversation, he put his head in his hands, and he just because he felt so guilt-ridden about his pitch to prospective students and their parents, saying that college education was worthwhile in and of itself, and that college was a financially advantageous path for a young person today, even in the liberal arts. And those two claims are very dubious. The latter one is famously dubious, where everyone is seeing that, yes, absolutely, that the average college graduate out earns the person without a collegiate degree, but it's almost a meaningless statistic because it's comparing everybody from engineers to pizza delivery guys. When somebody that is seriously considering going to college in a good college with good options is weighing that next to a career that he otherwise could take a hold of. Let's say, for instance, in the skilled trades, and there the numbers are not so easy. In fact, actually, they're quite clear, but they tend in the other direction. That the average electrician is always going to out earn the average college graduate. The average plumber is always going to out earn the average college graduate. And so here am I having this conversation with my friend in between my master's and my doctorate, knowing that I was going to go off into this academic path, but realizing I was going to be just as guilt ridden as my buddy, thinking that there had to be some solution. There had to be some way of reclaiming higher education so that those who were intellectually gifted and academically promising had a way of obtaining the education that their mind justly deserves, while also ensuring that it was not financially ruinous. That led us to founding the College of St. Joseph the Worker.
No, I love that, and I think it's such a important point for the audience. Just I think sometimes we talk about higher education in a very broad way when it depends on what you might be studying and
Right.
um, at what school, even in what geographic location. I think that's something sometimes that's not talked a lot about. If you look at the even the earnings on something like the college scorecard, the earnings in more expensive places are going to be higher than some place where students are working in a more rural place or in a lower cost of living place. So I think it is a hard thing to dissect. And I think you bring up a really great point just about the earning power if you're looking at that metric of the trades. You've talked a little bit about I think the phrase you used was the great divorce between the head and the hands. And can you talk a little bit about what exactly this means in the context of your work?
Well, most people today in America, if they hear kids smart, you say, go off and get a desk job one day, go off and be white collar. Those still, I mean, often and very readily, people will kind of demure and be hesitant, about recommending going into manual labor, for anybody, right? That we look down upon it in our society, whereas in cultures past, we would send our brightest and best into the building arts. That is no longer the case, and there's reasons for that. I mean, part of it is just the revolution of Frederick Winslow Taylor, of process engineering, of Ford and his assembly lines, of McDonald's and their stations, as it were, trying to extract thinking from manual activity. Whereas in the skilled trades, that's just so far from the case. It is an intellectual enterprise from the beginning. It is something that is creative and demands your creative capacity at every step and every stage of the process. That in many cases, in fact, you have more intellectual demands in the skilled trades than you do at the normal desk job, right? And so it has gotten a bad rap. It's gotten false reputation as being non-intellectual. But even beyond that, there is this problem I would identify in our modern intellectual discourse where we say that there are those meant for using their head and those using their hands when only reason that somebody has good content to consider with their mind is because they've dealt with things with their senses. So, I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas most famously talks about that he who has the greatest sense of touch will have the greatest intellectual sense as well. So there's something that we talk about common sense, right? And that comes because we've dealt with the world, we've felt it, we've bent it, we've shaped it, we've transformed it, which is the only way in which we come to know what it actually is. You know, in the intellectual life, we think about things in the abstract realm, in terms of their forms, in terms of their essences, but we've only ever dealt with or come to know what a form is, what an essence is in and through matter. And I think that's in part why we suffer so much from ideological discourse today, or such surface level and shallow thinking, is because we actually haven't filled our minds with enough content to consider, because we have also eliminated our contact with the physical world as well. Again, once upon a time, scholars were once manual laborers. That's just no longer the case anymore today.
Yeah, I was just reading, it mentioned we have a daughter, 15-month-old, 16-month-old, and I was reading this book,
That's a fun
by,
age. Yeah.
by, Freya India, called Girls.
Mm,
It just came out and is about, just some of the, I think, the critique of modern culture, specifically for young women, and a lot of it was about consumerism and social media and technology, and like being the cause, or at least like correlated with like declines in like happiness and a bunch of other metrics. And
mm,
I think sometimes we think a lot about the influence of these increasingly digital lives we lead, and spending so much time on computers. We don't necessarily think about that in the context of like that's also just like less, like, just lack of a better way of putting it, stuff we're doing with our hands, and everything you can outsource to someone else, to cook a meal for you, to fix something in your house, task rabbit to hang something on the wall. And everything is just, and I guess perhaps there's good things about that it has been like manual work has been like commodified and you can avoid it, but there probably is something unnatural, to your point, about that way of being.
I certainly think so, and what we've really done is replace the timeless education of childhood with a new and dangerous project that we have not really seen great results with. And when in the past, used to have kids that grew up working with their hands, and that was their contact of coming to know and experience the world as it is, that then enables them to think more critically, more dynamically, more subtly about it. And I'm trying to make the case that let's return to how we once upon a time did it. It worked pretty well. Things are going all right. In terms of education, today, not so much.
No, absolutely. And I guess just to, tying it all together, you're essentially building an institution that is, wedding these two things together and defying this,
Precisely.
wisdom that there's, that one option's better for some kids, one option's better for others. I think unfortunately there also is like that you reference like one is better than the other, which is just like not the case. And that yeah, that is really, really interesting. I think especially at a time when so many students are wondering, families as well, whether college is worth it. And I know that
Right.
you've put together a really interesting model for financial aid, I guess, so best way of putting it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. You know, you just mentioned something so important where you say that people are weighing whether or not college is worth it. Should my kid go to college or should they just go into a career? And what we're saying at the College of St. Joseph the Worker is you don't have to choose one. You can select both simultaneously. And so that's what we do. And as we train up students in the intellectual tradition and in the liberal arts to earn their bachelor's degrees, we also raise them up in the skilled trades to earn their certifications and journeyman status in whatever field that they choose. But because you get paid to train in the skilled trades, that completely offsets student tuition so that our students then graduate without any debt at all.
No, and I love it just doing this in the context of a brand new institution where you don't have, you don't have the, I think in some cases burdens of hundreds of years of a historical school where there's a ton of
Right,
entrenched interest. There's athletics teams that need to be supported, and
right,
research and bureaucracy, and not getting into conversation necessarily about that, but it was just like the 0 to 1 of building something that's brand new. You
precisely.
can do that with affordability in mind, and sort of, again, defy this like convention that just college has to be expensive, and that, you need to spend all this money, and that the cost is correlated with value, and just blowing that myth up.
Completely. We're choosing to go through the new experiments and just go for an old model that has had worked. And let's do it again. So we're trying not to reinvent the wheel. We say let's go back to doing it as we are. That means that it is a new institution, but the model is ever ancient. We're just making it ever new as well.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's great. How when in conversations with families, you and your admissions team, how are you thinking about, how are you encouraging the students and families to think about ROI? I know, interesting metrics you shared, just average, plumber, electrician, these skilled trades, immense earning potential. Just curious how else you're thinking about the return on investment.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, look, there's 2 ways of looking at it. The first is in terms of the trade itself, and the second in terms of the education. In terms of the trade, look, not all of our students will ultimately become tradesmen. Many of them will graduate even with their master's status, depending upon their background. So they will. Many of them, most of them. I expect the vast majority of them to go off into the skilled trades, which would be wonderful. Um, but if they choose not to, they have a bachelor's degree. They can go on for their master's. They can go off into another career. Will they ever regret the knowing how to fix up their house? Of course not. Those skills are always going to be assets. They will never be liabilities. They will have both enabled the student to graduate without any debt at all and enable them for to keep at a distance debt in the future because they don't have to call the plumber to come out for an hour and pay him $400. He doesn't need to pay the electrician, $400 to come out and see his house. He can take care of that himself. And then to have true dignity and ownership of that which he claims to be his own, namely his house. He's able to serve his family and in a brilliant and direct way by taking care of the problems that they face. So those are always going to be assets. They're never going to be liabilities. But look then over at the education. I think that preserving higher education is worthwhile because I do believe that these truths do make life more human. And a lot of different colleges and universities will make that same claim, and they'll say that the education is literally priceless. Well, if that's the case that it actually is priceless, then don't slap $100,000 price tag on it. That these need to be, uh, that the price of this really should be obtainable if it truly is priceless. And that's what we have enabled at the College of St. Joseph the Worker, is ensuring that our students get paid more through their apprenticeship than they're paying in their tuition.
Yeah, no, and I think just on both fronts, as far as tailwinds in the world. I think the rise of AI, like this is great on like both fronts, where we're seeing the quote unquote like white collar knowledge workers. Those are people whose jobs are in very tough places in many cases, just because a lot of the work that they're doing can now just be potentially like done by artificial intelligence or by technology, whereas that not you're not necessarily going to be able to use like AI to fix your the plumbing in your house, or to repair your roof, or to put an addition on, or anything like that. So just seems like a hedge against that. And then obviously just the thinking deeply, thinking for yourself, writing and reading original thought, that I think that's also something, unfortunately, where people we're losing some of that. And I think you know
Right.
hopefully there will be like more and more guardrails, and just as far as how younger students are thinking about these technologies, and applying them versus just like using them as shortcuts, and essentially like outsourcing some of their like thinking, and not building those skills.
You're right. I love how you said that. It's a hedge against AI on both fronts, both in terms of your mind as well as in your body, and of course, one should never forget the greatest life hack of all time, which is hard work. That's the best way to get ahead and beat everybody else.
As a former admissions officer, I'm really curious what it's been like designing an admissions process from scratch, and how you and your team thought about that to find the right students for the college. Just because a lot of ways they're going to be laying the foundation for the community and the alumni, and what this institution is going to be all about.
It has been a fun exercise and something that we have been refining and trying to figure out how do we assess the students and bring more of the ones that have thrived in this context. And so when I was going through undergrad, there were a couple of institutions that, or applying to undergrad, there were a couple of institutions that did interviews along the way. And one was Yale, the other was Georgetown, and I thought the process was absolutely brilliant. That for I felt for the first time that they were actually spending some time getting to know me, and that they were actually seeing me in all three dimensions, and the personality that went along with my data points as well. And that was a gift on the applicant side. It was for sure helpful on the institutional side as well, and that's something that we have adopted and found convincing as well. So that certainly takes more time, takes more effort, but of course, when we have, admittedly such a small acceptance pool, where we can only accept so many students, we really wanna make sure that they're the right ones, and that's worthwhile to us. That has been mainly the golden ticket so far in our process. Nothing We haven't recreated the wheel at all on that front, but the extra help, the extra effort has been a great help. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that like I completely agree. I think admissions, there's a lot of like focuses on efficiencies, now, and I think there's a missed opportunity for students. And I think also just for students feeling like they, earned it just by having some, more, hurdles that they might have to go through. And obviously, yeah, you don't want to make it like, such an arduous process for
Of
students.
course, yeah.
Just I think, clearly an opportunity to help you all showcase in those, conversations what makes College of St. Joseph the Worker really special.
Right, exactly, and in fact, those are some changes that we're implementing this year of making it less arduous on paper because we've found that for the most part, we've figured out some of those metrics that make for good applicants, right? And then from there, we get to see the person live, real in front of us, and so making it a little bit more streamlined and without taking away the opportunity for the person to shine interpersonally as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, I'm also curious, just you, like, many folks are the product of a traditional higher educational experience. And
Mhm.
from your perspective, what do you think traditional higher ed gets wrong about the trades?
Oh, well, I think, the 2 points that I made are the 2 biggest problems. One is that the trades are not intellectual work, they're exceedingly intellectual. The second is that they are preparatory for a thriving intellectual life. I think that it is different. You set artificial limits on your intellectual capabilities by not touching, feeling, bending, and breaking the world. So I think those are certainly the cases. The other thing that I'll throw in a third is that there is an immense amount of research to be done in the building arts. And boy, there are a few things that affect our lives as much as construction. Not just because it happens around us, but we live in our homes, we work in our offices, and that those are things that we first form, and then they turn around and they form us, as Churchill once said. And that context, our habits and our exposures really begin to transform the way that we ourselves experience the world and think about it as well. And so when we look at the building arts today, we're at an all-time low nearly that both
I didn't
structurally
realize that.
as well as aesthetically. We once built houses that stood hundreds of years. Now the average lifespan of a house is 50 years. Firefighters who keep better statistics on this than anybody because their lives are literally on the line once had 29 minutes before a flashover event. That's in legacy built houses. That's when the pressure builds up so much that everything bursts into flames. Now on conventionally built houses, that's between 3 and 7 minutes. Our houses are becoming more and more dangerous, and this is as well as ugly. And there is so much that we then can now put on the next generation, raising them up to give us something better, to give them something better, to begin to think critically and philosophically about how to build. What are the aspects that make a building more fit for its purpose, more fit to house and cultivate and nurture human life, and more fit to begin to order well the society that they're in? Those are, I think, are rich questions to be asked, questions that we're asking here at the College of St. Joseph the Worker, and things that really begin to be the nexus point between the Ivory Tower and Main Street.
Yeah, I know that research point. That's really, really interesting. And yeah, I mean, yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure it's really interesting for you and your community just to see all of that in practice, in your own surrounding community where you're helping to, you're seeing your students are seeing the impact of their work in town, which is really exciting. And can you talk a little bit about that, because I think that was a really another interesting part of the College of St. Joseph the Worker story.
Yeah, we found it in this dilapidated Rust Belt town of Steubenville, Ohio, which has a population of about 18,000 in it, but in our downtown, where there is a high concentration of inhabitants, we have an average annual income of $15,000. This is an exceedingly poor area. 80% of our storefronts are boarded up and closed, but with all that decimation, it also allows for a potential of great revitalization as well. And that is what we're getting our hands dirty doing. We bought up like, beautiful historic buildings such as the old federal courthouse, which now serves as our new academic hall. We've bought up a parking lot in the middle of town that we're about on Saturday to demolish and turn into our college quad that we've been able to bring life and to this area, making it more of a pedestrian centric zone that is bring literally showing to our students what they should be doing after they leave here in their own hometowns, and that is, frankly, bringing life to it, and transforming it and being a leader within it, and that's been a rich, rich gift to be a part of here for our hometown.
Yeah, no, and I did not mention this in the article or in the conversation, but they're, originally learned about College of St. Joseph the Worker, the really great article in the New Yorker. We'll drop that in the show notes, and just, yeah, some really, I really enjoyed, part of the article, just talking about, yeah, this idea of investing in your local community, and that, as far as, like, other ROI investments, like, that is just going to, be, incredibly, valuable for you, just the simple idea of spending money, like, where you live in your community with your neighbors, and it's going to just make where you live even better place. um as we begin to wrap up, Jacob, I have two last questions. I'm curious, number one, for students who, maybe you're a current student who's or sitting listening to this episode and nodding along, but maybe you're at another institution and you're like, okay, I'm like halfway done, probably not going to transfer. Are there ways of taking some of these, like, lessons and applying this in a practical way to my life, where I'm like, all right, I'm on board. As far as, trying to learn a skill, or just this, this, wedding of the hands and the head that you're talking about. So just, curious if you had any advice for listeners out there who might, something about this might be resonating.
I bet right now, if somebody is listening to that and in that situation, there's about 10 different things that they could think of skills to begin to acquire, right? So I will let them come up with that list on their own. But what I would say is that for a lot of us who are desk jockeys and used to being, behind, a piece of tree that has been transformed into, a nice office space, that we will often get dismayed when we start to acquire skills that we think should be more rapidly acquired than they actually are, and I would just say to them, "Don't be dismayed, like, keep going, it will be worth it. Your future self will thank you immensely for having these skills, and that skills themselves make you more social. They are literally gifts that then you are able to give to others. I think about, guys on our team in that the more skilled you are, the more friends that you have because more people look up to, admire, are grateful to you for what you can offer them, and isn't that what we all want at the end of the day, is just rich friendships. I mean, that is such a beautiful thing, and so I would say that is push through, acquire those skills, don't be dismayed. That would actually be the main encouragement I'd
Yeah,
give.
no, that's, I think, yeah, great advice. We are very impatient. Oh,
I chief amongst them, so,
yeah, yeah, no,
let me know
very,
cast no stones.
guilty.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess my last question, and this is more for high school students, parents of high school students. What questions do you think a student who, maybe they're a high school junior right now, is starting to think a bit more about what they, might want out of a higher education, or out of life? What questions do you think they should be asking themselves more frequently as they think about this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the biggest thing for people considering college is, are you do you feel called to the academic life or just the intellectual life? All humans must cultivate an intellectual life. None of us get off the hook for that. We were built with a mind that seeks truth and seeks beauty, so that then we might then know how to engender goodness in the world, right? So none of us are off the hook for of reading, of considering things deeply, of contemplating well. It's just whether or not you want to do that at a higher level. If you want dedicated space and time with mentors who are there to direct and challenge you, to try you in that discipline at an advanced level. And some people ought to do this, and it's necessary for them to do this, and there'd be something wrong with the world if they did not go off to college. That is the person that we're looking for to apply at the colleges they just whereas alternatively, if you love the intellectual life and you like thinking about things deeply, but it's more of a challenge and strain to do that in the classroom, then you need to be looking for a career that is going to make your life more human, and that you should not settle, and you should not you should not make a move too quickly there, but you should not consider college. That you can do something better for you, subjectively better for you, and that is maybe a tough conversation because our
Mhm.
society wants to throw everybody into college, but that is not something that you should be too mindful of. The question is, what is going to lead to your human flourishing? And that is a critical question indeed.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on, Jacob. Thank you so much for this great conversation. Excited to share more with all the students and parents and Scholarships 360 about the College of St. Joseph the Worker. We'll include some links in the show notes and then the email that goes out about this to all the Scholarships 360 community. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciated the conversation with you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Office Hours with Will Geiger. If you're a student or parent, don't forget to check out app.scholarships360.org, where you can sign up for our free scholarship matching platform. For colleges, we've got solutions to make your work easier, which you can check out at connect.scholarships360.org. And one last thing, if you or someone you know would make a great guest on the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can always reach me by email or on LinkedIn. Until next time, thanks again for listening.